So my friend got this 3D printer for free from a family member, and it's a bit old. It's from 2017, and it's a Monoprice Mini V2 something or other. The name will be in the title of the video. And I made a little YouTube short about it, but I figured it was worth talking about in a more long-form video because this thing is the most adorable little fire hazard I've ever come across. Well, let me explain. So, this was made at a time when a machine like this, which is small, doesn't have like a dedicated parts killing fan. Its firmware is extremely basic, and they still retail for the same price as an Ender 3 Pro. It's not nearly as good as an Ender 3 Pro. But let me tell you what I did learn when working with this thing. So, first off, the firmware it comes with most likely will not have thermal runaway protection. That's a big no-no. So you think, hey, let's update the firmware. Cool. There's still the data out there. You know, you get the firmware.bin file, you put it on an SD card, load it up, and then you do a special procedure with the dial on a certain menu, and it should update. However, the SD cards that this thing can read are limited to around 2 gigs. So any sort of SD card that is high capacity or something of that nature simply will not be able to be read on this machine. Long story short, if you don't have the stock SD card that came with this thing, good luck getting anything to read on the SD card. So you might be thinking, how am I printing this? Well, I did get Octoprint to work on it, but not without my fair share of troubles. So, the Octoprint installation, my work area is a bit messy here. Where is, there it is. It's a Pi Zero, which is something that Octoprint just straight up doesn't even officially support. There's a warning that pops up when you log into Octoprint that says, hey, you know what, we haven't nor will we ever support the Pi Zero officially. There's problems with it. It also doesn't help that it doesn't have normal USB ports. So in order to plug a micro USB connection to a micro USB connection, I had to use this old OTG adapter from my phone that goes from micro USB, and it's a hub, and then goes to regular USB back to micro USB. But that isn't the end of the problems with this. You see, getting this far also requires that Octoprint download a specialized plugin in order to get the baud rate to be detected and work properly on this machine. It is a special trick that is required to get it to work at all. Now, you can get this thing to connect to Wi-Fi only if you use a special app that was developed third-party, and then you can have this thing connect to a specific Wi-Fi address, and you can connect to this computer or to this printer by typing in the IP address in a web browser. But all you can do is upload G-code, start and stop, and monitor temperature. It's extremely basic. And guess what? If your SD card isn't readable in the first place, well, you're not going to be able to upload that G-code to be read off the printer at all anyway. So, if you're like me, you don't have an SD card small enough to work, so you're just going to be running a dedicated out of Octoprint. But once you get past all that, you come to the other funky things about this. It's a pretty small bed, and you can level the bed, but what the heck are we doing here? You have to level the bed with these hex screws downward. So there's no way to level this thing live, as like you do with an Ender 3, where you can just screw up and down a knob on the bottom. No, you have to come straight down with an Allen key and try and get it right. And that's on top of the fact that this thing doesn't come with a build surface other than this really generic, tacky thing, which is not removable, and it looked like it was going to be a giant nightmare to begin with. When you buy Overture filament, they send you these extra pads to print on for free. I figured, alright, I'll just cut that size, stick it on there, and hey, look at that, it seems to be working just fine. Now, when we got this thing, the people who gave it to us said, oh yeah, it just needs a new nozzle. Well, that was definitely not the case. It had one ancient clog. And this is that clog right there. It's an all-metal hot end. I believe it's a genuine V5 hot end. But this little carrot was stuck in the heat break. Something fierce. So I had to intentionally induce heat creep into the hot end and then push down with an Allen key about close to the size of the bore of the heat break as I could, and just pop this little bad mamma jam out of there. And then I had to go find a nozzle. The only nozzles that I had were outside of the 0.4 millimeter that I usually use, so I'm using a 0.6 millimeter nozzle. This thing does not have a silicone sock, but it does have a spot for the thermistor to retain itself. But they decided not to use that. No, they're just going to wrap some cotton and Captain tape and place the thermistor directly on the block and pray to God that the tape holds it in place. Not the most ideal of connections. It's also not a standard J-head either. It's a J-head from a long time ago, so it's more like a square block instead of a rectangular block. So, with all this being said, getting into this point was a bit tricky. So, I got the bed leveled, I got it running on Octoprint. I need to update the firmware because there are updates, and I really don't feel like this thing catching on fire just because it decides that, well, doesn't want to have a thermal runaway protection in it. But man, let me tell you what, this thing is just an example of how far 3D printing has come in the last few years. I've only been printing for about 2-3 years now, and let me tell you what, the amount of innovation that has been made in that time is astonishing. So when you go back all the way to 2017 and you come to a machine like this, man, you really appreciate the modern features of a 3D printer. I mean, we've dealt with printers that are older than this. If you look back at my videos, we have an old MakerBot made it from wood. Yeah. Wood. This thing being made out of metal was a huge upgrade. But that being said, yeah, there's not really much we plan to do with this thing. It was fun kind of bringing it back to life and, you know, letting it do its thing for once, but I doubt there's going to be any major things worth doing on this thing. But we'll see. We'll see.